Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast. That is, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. I'm Paul Gigot here with Kim Strassel and Kyle Peterson. And let's listen to Donald Trump on Wednesday evening talk about the debate over raising the debt limit and the risks of a national default on American debt.
I say to the Republicans out there, congressmen, senators, if they don't give you massive cuts, you're going to have to do a default. And I don't believe they're going to do a default because I think the Democrats will absolutely cave, because you don't want to have that happen. But it's better than what we're doing right now, because we're spending money like drunken sailors.
So just to be clear, Mr. President, you think the U.S. should default if the White House does not agree to the spending cuts Republicans are demanding?
Well, you might as well do it now, because you'll do it later, because we have to save this country. Our country is dying. Our country is being destroyed by stupid people, by very stupid people.
You once said that using the debt ceiling as a negotiating wedge just could not happen. You said that when you were in the Oval Office.
That's when I was president.
So why is it different now that you're out of office?
Because now I'm not president.
Well, Caitlin Collins walked into that one. Kyle, I think the intriguing thing about this is that Trump complicated the job of Kevin McCarthy. He was basically saying to Republicans in the House, don't worry about default. It's not that big a deal. It's going to happen sooner or later, and it'll be psychological anyway. He said at another point, the impact. I think that's not quite what it would be, or the psychological impact could also have significant financial implications if it actually came to that. Now, I don't think there will be, but I think from Trump's point of view, if there is a default and the negative consequences, they won't affect him politically. They would affect Joe Biden, which would arguably help him. But if I were Joe Biden, what I would react to this and say is, I got to make some concessions to McCarthy so that he can come by and sell that to his caucus, because otherwise, with Trump's taunting, we could end up in default.
Exactly. And that's why I'm not really quite sure which way this cuts, maybe both ways, because I agree with you. I mean, this is a signal from the last Republican president, the front runner in the 2024 nomination contest, at least in the polls right now, that Republicans need to get something, and they need to get something real in order to raise the debt ceiling. And President Biden has so far refused to have any sort of negotiation, refused to concede that he's going to give anything after losing the House, even though his party only controls half of Congress now. And so I agree that Biden should be hearing those comments and thinking, I should have started negotiating yesterday. And so maybe this will push him in that direction a little bit. But on the other hand, you're right. I mean, it may also harden the stance of some of those backbenchers in the House, those Republicans who really want serious cuts. And the argument will inevitably be with Kevin McCarthy over what serious means. And that's true with the statement that President Trump said, too. I think he used the phrase massive cuts. We need some sort of massive cuts. And obviously, he didn't define that. And so maybe if we get a deal between Kevin McCarthy and Joe Biden, that McCarthy can go back and sell to his conference, that will get the blessing of President Trump. But it certainly seems to raise the stakes, and in a way that I thought looked a little bit unserious. I mean, you have the former president saying it would just be not a big deal if we default. I mean, maybe it feels that way to a former businessman who is familiar with bankruptcy, but the private bankruptcy process would be a little bit different from what we're talking about here with the national default.
We'll see how this goes. Also interesting was the president's response on abortion. We don't have a clip on that, but I just summarize it by he basically refused to take a position on whether he'd support a bill that would restrict abortion at the national level. He took credit for repealing Roe v. Wade, said he was the president who did it, the first one in 50 years, almost mentioned the Supreme Court only in passing for having played a role in that. But one-man Supreme Court. And then in regard to abortion laws, he said, well, look, we'll work it out. The repeal of Roe gave the pro-life movement negotiating a power that they lacked, which is true. But it also gave the abortion rights movement a lot more negotiating power because suddenly restrictions on abortion are a very real possibility. And he just ducked it, Kim. He just refused to take a stand. And I guess the question is this a shrewd answer? Because the public is actually much more along the lines of favoring some restrictions on abortion more than Roe v. Wade era restrictions, but they want it to be legal. The majority of Americans want it to be legal. So is this shrewd on his part, or could this cost him in the Republican primaries?
Maybe shrewd or maybe calculated. I think, and Donald Trump is looking for any area where he feels like he can be in a different position from Ron DeSantis. Obviously, Florida recently passed its 6-week bill, and I think the Trump team is making the calculation that this may prove too problematic, at least in the general election, that maybe he's got enough juice in the primary with all of his supporters that they will overlook this, as it were, seeing that he did say all the right things up there on the stage about pro-life movement, the fact that, it was good we got rid of Roe v. Wade, but he seems to be very deliberately not taking a position on the number of weeks or where it should be, just like, well, let the states work this out and they have negotiating power. I think that is designed. He thinks that he can get through this primary, that he won't necessarily lose the pro-life crowd because of other positions that he has, because of his history at the Supreme Court and the work he did, as you noted, took full credit for, that he'll get enough credit for that he'll bring enough along people, and that this may be better position him in the general. I'm not sure that's exactly the case. I think that it's a potential for other Republicans in the primary to try to pin him down and really make him look as though he's waffling if he won't give an answer. But at least for now, in this environment, I think that it probably was a fairly shrewd answer just to give him some running room.
The resort to taking credit for repeal of Roe v. Wade, I think, is a form of political immunity for him. I mean, he's going to use that. And a lot of pro-life voters will say, you know what? Yeah, he did. He appointed these justices and they did it. And we're really happy with that. And, you deserve some credit for that. And that shows, I think, one of the appeals he has to many Republican voters, which is that they like the policy record of his first term, Kyle. So I guess the question is, given that backdrop, that many Republicans did like that, and the president hit the economy in particular, hit it very hard, the comparison between the Biden economy and his economy. Where are the openings that appeared here in this debate that other Republican candidates will be able to look to and potentially go after?
Well, let me start with a couple thoughts I want to add on to what Kim said on the abortion point. I mean, I agree that it looks like a shrewd position to dodge a little bit for now, because we are a long way from these primaries. And we haven't had a real political debate about abortion in this country for decades. And so it's not quite clear where the individual states are going to fall. And so he's giving himself a little bit of time to let that play out. And the second thing I would add is that he did the thing that I think pro-lifers have been wanting from candidates for a long time, which is he turned the tables and he said, I think the other side is the radicals. They're talking about allowing abortion, all through 9 months. And I think that even on top of the fact that he appointed the justices that reversed Roe v. Wade, I think that is what will keep pro-lifers on board with him, is watching him take that swing at the other side. But as this plays on, I mean, I do think that he is going to get pushed to be more specific. Mike Pence, I think, has already said that he would sign a bill at 15 weeks. Tim Scott has said he might go further than that, I believe. And so there will be pressure when he gets on the debate stage to take a more substantive stance. That is certainly an opening for him. I think the Ukraine stuff is an opening for Republican candidates, saying that we once had a Republican president who knew when to call an evil empire an evil empire. And now we have a guy who's leading the pack here who won't say that the invaders are the bad guys and should lose the war. But the main thing, I think, is where we started. I think that there's huge openings for Republicans to say, we agreed with a lot of the Trump agenda, we supported it at the time, but you're not going to get that from 4 more years of President Trump. You're just going to get more controversies, more lawsuits, more court cases, more tweets, more drama. And I'm the guy who can deliver that same agenda without the drama, and you're not going to have to think about what the president tweeted last night for the next 4 years.
Kim, the Never Back Down, which is the Ron DeSantis affiliated political super PAC, issued a statement about the debate. This was actually before the debate. I didn't see one afterwards, but it said, it was interesting that it said it praised Trump for being a outsider candidate who fought the elites and the media in 2016. But now it says Trump is in league with CNN and the elites, and then touted Ron DeSantis's record as the real alternative and the new insurgent. Didn't have many attack lines on Trump, though, nothing specific. And I think that's where DeSantis and the other candidates are going to have to get more specific and really hit Trump.
Yeah, a couple of points. I mean, one, I do think this argument that Trump allied to himself with CNN is something that DeSantis and his team is going to do. And I think it's also a danger for Trump because one dynamic you continue to see playing out with him, and I think it's just something he can't help himself from doing, is that he gets mad at Republicans when they don't entirely get on board, or he wants to take a shot at an opponent who actually is standing up for a true conservative ideal. And he ends up crosswise where he's in another place. This is how he ended up on CNN. He's mad at Fox News right now. So here he's now, off with the CNN people. Or, look at his position when he came out. He wanted to separate himself from DeSantis and its moves on Disney. And he finds himself essentially on the side of a corporation that is pretty woke. And a lot of people were kind of questioning that. But I agree that DeSantis is going to have to be more specific. And there are a lot of places there, and a lot of them were on display last night. One of them, you played that clip talking about, this country is a disaster. We're spending so much. I am waiting for the Republican candidate who comes out and lays out Donald Trump's spending record from 2016 to 2020, because it's pretty horrific. And the willingness of Republicans to do how many rounds of those $1,400 checks during the COVID lockdowns, et cetera, to the extent that we have a major debt problem at the moment, it was in no small part from some record spending levels that came about in the latter years of the Trump presidency. I think there's a lot of other things that can get in foreign policy that you can get specific on. But I agree the candidates are going to have to start doing that. Not go down the line of attacking Trump from the left-wing talking points, okay? That's not going to earn them any points among the base. But to remind people that if they believe in conservative policies, there's plenty of places here where you can look back at that record.
Right. One of which is Anthony Fauci.
There you go.
Dr. Fauci led the president along on the lockdowns, which did so much considerable damage during COVID. All right. Thank you, Kyle, and thank you, Kim. Nothing else. This will be entertaining as Donald Trump moves on, and we'll have to do the media meltdown for another day. So thank you both. Thank you all for listening. We're back every day with Potomac Watch, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for listening.